Yes, we welcome you again to the Breakfast in the City show. Today we are not in the studios. We've moved outside broadcasting. We've just gone to the offices of Invictus Foundation with the man, the chairman of the foundation, called Chris Darkins. He's called Christopher, but we refer to you as Chris, as is an easy name to mention. So he's the guy that we're here with, and he's going to tell us more about the foundation. As you know, I'm Cuba Hero Gad, as the host of the show. Of course, I'm with Sabiti, who is going to have time to talk to you in the meantime. But I want to share you with their mental health. Why men's mental health important? This is going to be our main topic today, because medical experts say that men, just like women, suffer from mental health problems. However, women are more likely to seek and receive help for common mental health problems like anxiety and depression. So, and even statistics show that in Rwanda, more specifically, middle-aged men, broadly defined age 30 to 59, are more likely not to talk about their mental health issues or seek help. We shall really explore much about that, because very many factors include like history, like culture, like, you know, we're going to explore more about that within an hour. So even in 2018, Rwanda Biomedical Center RBC survey on the state of mental health in Rwanda showed that less than 2% of population has access to mental health services, leaving a large gap in reaching out to persons who need the services. This gap in access to mental health services, according to the researchers, is partly caused by lack of knowledge on available services and where to seek those services from, fear of being victimized in society, as I said above, cultural factors include, and also the facilities and long distance travel to reach the available centers. This is the introduction to what we are going to be talking about. I will come to the program with my co-host Sabiti, and of course with Chris Darkins, the chairman of Invictus Foundation.
So welcome back to the show, and as God introduced the show, today we have Chris Darkins, Christopher O.G. Darkins, was born in 1974 in San Francisco in California. He attended school like any other person, of course, and he's a graduate of Minnesota, University of Minnesota in 1994, and he's also a footballer. Footballer, not as in soccer, as in American football. That means what close to rugby, you know, in Rwanda. There's a difference between soccer and football, and most people confuse it. But for this case, we are talking about the NFL, the National Football League. It's a big thing in the U.S., and every year we have this the Super Bowl, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So he has a big profile, and you can actually find it on Wikipedia and try to learn about him. But the reason why we're having him here is not because of his football, although it is going to come in a little bit into the story as we talk about mental health. Dawkins decided Chris decided to move from the US to come back to Africa. And as you saw, one of his middle names is OG. OG, which means he has African roots. For just a little bit of description, he's in Kinyarwanda they say Ijea. He's like he has muscle, so you can see that as a fullback, a quarterback fullback. But This is the most important part of Chris. He decided to leave the US and come to Rwanda. Chris, welcome to the show, and please say hello to your colleagues at Invictus Foundation. Invictus Foundation is a product or is a child of Invictus Securities and Consultants. And Invictus Security and Consultancy is a registered company that operates in Rwanda, but also an annex or a sister company of the Invictus Securities in the US. Welcome to the show.
Marakoze.
Have you learned some Kinyarwanda yet?
You know, I've been trying. It's a very difficult language to capture, but you know, when you can speak Kinyarwanda, you make yourself sound really wise when you translate it into English, because every saying seems to have some type of, you know, historic meaning to it. African football, soccer, was my first love. I actually grew up playing it all the way through high school, and it was just that in America, football with the, you know, with the hands, the rugby style football actually pays more money. So I ended up transitioning from football, as you know it, soccer, into, you know, American football, where you get beat up a lot. But you know, sports has been a big part of my life. It has, you know, kind of formed me in terms of discipline, the ability to focus on achieving goals, working together with people as a team. So that's been a very big part of it. The other aspect has always been about advocacy, you know, fighting for, number one, yourself, but also for the people that you care about. And I have always, at some shape or form, whether it's in middle school, high school, or college, been in some form of leadership for some advocacy groups. In high school, it was I was student body president for a pretty much all-white school, obviously advocating for the interests of students. At the University of Minnesota, I was a 3-time team captain, first one ever in the school's history, advocating for, you know, the student athletes. Started and formed the Minnesota Student Athlete Association. So advocacy has always been a big part of my life. And you know, later on, after college, I went on and did a lot of criminal justice advocacy. I was awarded by given a certificate of congressional recognition for my work in actual criminal justice reform and advocacy in the United States. And as you may have heard, our communities, African American communities, face a lot of challenges from the justice system in America. And you know, it has, to a large degree, systematically been used as a tool to oppress us. And you know, for me, that was a very important issue, because we find ourselves in constant contact with the justice system and with the police forces. So naturally, at some point in America, you get to the position where you're kind of like, okay, how do I move forward? How do I progress? How do I develop a better understanding of who I am, where I've been, because that informs where you need to go. And in that search, that quest to kind of get a better understanding of who I am, I started traveling back and forth to Africa. And I would say that started maybe 15 years ago. Started on the West Coast, Ghana, you know, the typical places that you traditionally go when you think about Africa. You go to Ghana, you think about Nigeria, you know, so I've been to Ghana, Nigeria, Cameroon, Mali, Sierra Leone, a number of different countries on the western coast, trying to see if I can get closer to my identity. And then that just didn't seem to fit. And then you know, a friend of mine who I'd actually played against in college had started Invictus Security Interests, which is a CCTV provider for the government of Rwanda, and asked me if I wanted to kind of participate in what he was doing. And I looked at it as a novel opportunity to actually get back on the continent and contribute in somewhat of a meaningful way, right? So I ended up coming to Rwanda. My first trip here was maybe a little 2.5, 3 years ago. And, you know, I obviously fell in love with the beauty of the place. But then I also felt like the people here, the culture, were things that I could identify with. And since then, I've been going back and forth, and now I'm actually a permanent fixture in the country of Rwanda now.
Just to go back a little bit about you, most young men would love to to go to San Francisco, to stay there, or even be in Minnesota or in Cincinnati or New York, Washington. Why would you choose to leave such places and come to Africa?
Yeah, I think the reality of it is much different than the picture that you're shown. I was born in San Francisco, but I lived in LA for a good 7-8 years in life. And, you know, it's an expensive place to live. And quite candidly, there are probably more homeless people in Los Angeles than there are, you know, across these three countries, Kenya, Rwanda, and Tanzania. So, you know, they have what they call tent cities. They have, you know, spaces where there are blocks and blocks and blocks of homeless people. So it's not the rosy picture they paint. Now again, weather's beautiful here, right? You know, the people, you know, you get all different varieties. It's a multicultural city, but you know, you can find that in other places. So, you know, unless you like to spend a lot of money living on your lifestyle, you know, I lived in Beverly Hills, so I was a little bit privileged, but it costs, it's expensive. And there's a big drop off between where I was living versus where most people who go to Los Angeles and try to make it are living. And, you know, people don't really get the opportunity to kind of see that until they actually get there and are experiencing it. And then they start to realize that, you know, this is not the dream place that I thought it was. And not everybody becomes a mega superstar as an actor.
We shall certainly come back to dream places in life and how people actually shape their lives as young children, as adults, the choices we make, maybe in the second part of the show. But this pressure that people live through, besides being African Americans that are being, I would like to call it hunted, because even most movies are being acted about this divide that is between the Africans and African Americans and the Caucasians. At the end of the day, it puts pressure on somebody. The economy puts pressure on somebody. The racial divide also puts pressure on somebody. And somehow people start going through several or different types of mental health issues. As a young man living in the US and playing especially in the football league, did this influence you, this kind of pressure and mental health struggle that you're going through? Did it influence who you are today to the level that we are actually moving towards solving some of the issues that men go through?
Yeah, you know, I would characterize America as a mercenary culture. You know, it's capitalism, right? So there's the perception that there's a finite amount of resources, right? We print this many bills, and if you want to eat, you have to get some of those bills. So the concept is that, you know, if I'm going to eat, I got to take it from somebody because nobody's giving it to me, right? So it creates this non-communal living environment in which it's eat or be eaten, right? And you know, as you know, if you live in that type of environment where the thought of you getting food for the day is really dependent on you taking something or convincing somebody to give you something, right, that they probably need, then you know, you find yourself in a situation where you got a lot of anxiety. And I think America is, for African Americans, is a place that creates the mental health issues associated with anxiety and depression, because they print the dollar bills. We don't. So they decide who gets them. They decide who distributes them. And I think it's a lot of what you saw in colonialism on the continent here is that, when the colonial masters came in, the first thing they did is said, okay, well, it's going to start taxing people on their property. So now, in order to pay taxes, you got to go get a colonial dollar. They print the colonial dollar, and then they give it to whoever they want to redistribute it. Now you have to go beg somebody who has the colonial dollar for a job. And you say, hey, can you give me a job so I can get some of these colonial dollars to pay my taxes? Right? So at first it forces you into subservience, right? So in America, I mean, that system is very well defined. It is very well structured. It's almost seamless. You don't see it. So that's where it becomes a mercenary culture. And really the only opportunity for someone who is not an instrumentality of the system, someone who distributes the dollar bills, you have to figure out how you take it. And a lot of times you find yourself having to operate in gray areas if you want any level of financial success, and or selling out who you are to those people that have it, that have those colonial dollars for distribution. Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, yes, you did. You did, because the reason why I'm pushing on this level of understanding your background, it feeds into what you're doing today. The pressure that builds with time from the financials, the laws or the social pressure, the political, the financial, whatever you want to level it to. Now, we come to the foundation. The foundation is here to help show men that actually men can also be mentally sick, and there is no reason to in Kinyarwanda they say kwihagarara, put your legs on the head, like stand on yourself.
See, saying something nice in Kinyarwanda makes you sound wise.
We shall come back to the African thing because this was another driving factor in your story. So what is the foundation helping people in Rwanda today?
Right. Let me give just a little bit of context in line with your point. I would say that the mental health issues I challenge, 80% of them are environmental, right? It's societal. So, we all engage in activities that's counterproductive. It's counterproductive and it's counterculture. And because we all engage in them, I'm now stuck in this trap where everybody around me is doing things that don't make sense. And I'm doing something and I realize it doesn't make sense. You do things on a daily basis that you look and say, why do I do this? This doesn't make sense, right? But we all do it because at least in Africa now, they're starting to ride the wave of the West. Let's be more westernized, right? So you're in a place where there's abundance. There's abundance of resources available to you. This is the richest continent on the planet, but somehow they lead you to believe that everybody's poor here, right? How can you steal from people who are poor, right? Western countries have been coming over here taking resources for centuries now. But so it's counterculture. It doesn't make sense. In America, the system is locked in, right? Europeans decided that they needed to go out and explore and conquer because the land that they came from was not resource rich. So if you want to feed your people, you need to get on a boat, you need to travel across the ocean, you need to put some Indians in their place, you need to get some Africans from Africa to come work for you, to do all the work so you can till the land and send the food back. You come to Africa, you look at this place where they're like, oh, it's an abundance, right? Milk and honey. There's an abundance of food, abundance of resources, abundance of water. All of these things exist in abundance. So an African's mindset is that I don't need to hoard anything. There's enough. I just go pick it down from a tree and I can eat it. Oh, you're coming over? Yeah, we got enough for you too. Come on over. But a European comes, I got a whole family back here that I need to get some of this stuff, take back and send it. I'm in a hoard mentality. So I approach Africa with a different perspective. And then from an African standpoint, you're looking at it and you're like, I don't understand why he's being so aggressive and violent. I said he could have whatever he wanted to off the tree, right? So then, we fast forward. The next thing you know, we're sitting here and we're saying, okay, let's continue to play the colonial game. Let's continue to operate with colonial dollars. Let's engage in agriculture, and let's focus on cash crops, not sustenance crops. Let's not focus on creating what we eat. Let's focus on creating what we can sell to get some European dollars, right? So the foundation is really a place where, from a man's perspective, we can address these issues on a wider scale that are societal, so we can all start looking at it from a different frame. Because you end up creating that very pressure cooker that in America creates so much anxiety. And here today, Rwanda already has its challenges. You know, the genocide that has happened has created a lot of trauma, right? A lot of anxiety from people, you know, with people, a lot of depression. You know, people were ripped away from their families and never seen relatives again. So you already have those challenges, and then you put the Western pressure cooker on top of that, right? And then now you're dealing with problems that you've imported problems.
The Nana problems.
Yeah. So the foundation focuses on awareness, identifying what these challenges are, where they come from, and how we face them. Outreach, going out to schools, going out into community events, having conversations, providing, you know, a foundation or a basis of which you can identify the problem, you can address the problem, and then advocacy, right? Really speaking on behalf of people who have mental health issues to the point where they don't feel like it's a taboo. To acknowledge the fact that you're anxious. If you're anxious, you're anxious. If you're depressed, you're depressed. Acknowledge it, address it, right? Don't bring that back into your household and then now create a bad environment in your household because you don't want to acknowledge the fact that you have challenges that you need help to solve.
Men can, up to now, they don't understand. They will not believe you that actually they can be mentally sick. So how are you going to communicate that message? What are the tools? What are the venues? What are the avenues you're going to be using to actually communicate that message? And let alone even the confusion of us living lives that are not ours. Speaking languages that are not ours. We shall come to the issue of the Urwagwa. That's the most important story for me. It keeps ringing to my mind every time I think about Chris. So, how are you going to, which avenues are you going to use as a foundation to actually bring this message to men, to also to understand their mental problems, but also to understand who they are as Africans, to actually own themselves?
You know, avenues, you know, like I said, it's getting into schools, partnering with programs that are already there, figuring out how we can augment the curriculum that they're delivering, provide resources and services that are specifically focused on addressing mental health for men, working with some of the religious groups as well and helping them, you know, kind of push through the message of mental health and wellness. You know, there's events, sports events. Sports is a very big opportunity for us. You know, with me having a sports background, and you know, the amount of penetration you get and visibility you get from working in the sports space is very important for building awareness as well. So, you know, for us, there are a number of different channels that we're going to be targeting and approaching, and you know, that's kind of the strategy, right? Go wide.
You know, in Rwanda, there's a very big silent policy or even principle whereby only government comes in to help, you know, but after somebody has done something for themselves. For the last 2 years, let's say, what have you been able to do? And which other areas would you like government to come in and help you so that this agenda actually becomes a national agenda? Because I personally, I also have mental problems, and I would love to sit with other men by the fireside, you know, have this conversation as men.
Well, the foundation is fairly young. We've been operational in this office for right around a month now. Excuse me. So we haven't had the opportunity to get out and do a lot yet. Most of our stuff has been really focused on focus groups, bringing men in, sitting around a table and having conversations about mental health. What is it, and how does it evidence itself in your daily actions? So we've had a number of different work groups, focus groups, where we've done that type of work. Excuse me. But we're looking to expand our activities.
What are your focus areas besides in Kigali?
Well, right now we're focusing on Kigali. Yeah,
Why Kigali?
because it's close. You know, I think you made the comment, or Gad made the comment, that the distance for people to get to mental health services is somewhat long. And our footprint is right here in this facility, so we want to kind of touch this area and then begin to develop satellite facilities in partnership and or standalone.
When you come to mental health, you base on some numbers at some time to be able to understand the problem. In one of your plans as Invictus Foundation, you have a plan of carrying out research. What will be the scope of the research?
So the purpose of the research is for us to get a better understanding of what the community, the men in the community, perceive are the needs. There hasn't been a lot of focus on what do men want, what do men need, how do men define mental health issues, what's the best way to talk to men about it, what are the top 5 issues that men face and that men see. So a lot of that work is going to be focused on developing male-specific demographic information relative to mental health and its needs in the communities.
How are you going to be able to reach out the youth, or is your focus going to be on the youth, male or every male?
It's male. It's that demographic from early childhood to late adulthood. You know, we talk about statistics that by themselves create anxiety, unemployment. What does being unemployed mean? You don't have a job. It means you're not serving the interest of a distributor of colonial currency. What does it mean that you can't work some land and eat? You don't have a place to stay. What does being unemployed mean? So when we start thinking about the concept of as a man, you got to go out and you got to get a job working for somebody, right? Where you'd be factored into those unemployment statistics or employment statistics. That in and of itself creates anxiety. Now I have to hope somebody is going to give me an opportunity to be considered amongst the employed, right? Now I'm not at all advocating that men shouldn't go out and work. But what I will say is that the nature of work and how we go about doing it has changed. And in that, it has kind of changed the definition of manhood. And at one point in time, when providing for your family was going out hunting and farming and bringing the food back home, now it's going out and sitting down in a suit and tie in an interview in front of somebody, asking them to give you an opportunity to come to their place of work and do some work for them. One aspect we have more control over, the other not so much. So that in and of itself creates a huge amount of anxiety for a population, right? And specifically for men whose primary value is the ability to provide. And now you've taken that control out of their hands and put it into the corporate hands that exist.
There's a book, I don't remember the author, but it says how to raise a guy or a dude, how to raise a husband, how to raise a father. The book tries to show that there's a difference between being a boy, a father, and a husband. Now, mental health problems have been one of the biggest causes of issues that we have in families. Do you agree with that?
I do. I do.
How do they affect the family and relationships?
Well, I think you just brought up a good point. How to raise a dude, how to raise a husband, and how to raise a father. I think those roles have been convoluted as to what they actually are. And to the extent that we don't have a clear common definition as we did historically, it's hard to know whether or not you're meeting the requirement, if you're meeting the bar. And then that leaves you subject to anybody's criticism, right? Your wife could criticize you saying you're not doing this. Well, that might not be part of the unified definition. Your mother might criticize and say you're not doing this, right? Somebody else might criticize you in concert with your wife and say you're not doing X, Y, and Z, right? A lot of anxieties. We don't have a clear understanding of what is the goal and the objective. So when we talk, So when we talk about father and husband, look at a definition. Father, if you look at the word Abba, it means one who builds a strong household. Husband, one to whom knowledge is given, who then shares with his wife, right? So when we start looking at these definitional roles, what you'll see is that society creates a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, because we don't understand I'm sorry, it's not that we don't understand, because culturally there were some pretty clearly defined roles as to what a husband was supposed to do, what a father was supposed to do, what a mother was supposed to do, what a wife was supposed to do. But those have been washed away, right? And we continue to erode that with the introduction of Western principles. So now you have Rwandans, Africans, who are very closely connected to their culture, now being pulled further away from it. So they're seeing that schism. And I'm not a psychologist. We have experts that we consult. These are my opinions. These are my observations. And I welcome a psychologist to come and sit down and let's have a conversation about how this being pulled away from your culture into a whole different Western civilization or principles affects someone's mindset, their disposition, their mental health status, right? How much anxiety does that create? Do you get anxious when you start thinking about, how can I be a good husband, or how can I be a good father? Am I meeting the bar, right? Those are all of these challenges that create difficulties. And to the extent that we as men can sit down around a table and say, look, this is what we understand these things to be, and this is how we're faring, and then what can be done to help get me in alignment with what needs to happen. Then we can address anxiety issues, right? But we have to identify what the cause of the anxiety is, and then the factors that are creating these new environments that we as Africans are operating in, right? I was born into a totally foreign environment, but my culture, my DNA, says I'm supposed to do things a certain way, right? Now, you guys were born into what I would perceive to be your cultural foundation, and now in front of your eyes, you're being pulled away from it, right?
Well, my question simply goes in a way that is a concern to the society, and also for the civil societies and other organizations that work with the well-being and the societies in general. It is about if you really see this as, mental health for men as a very, very, very dangerous thing, or something that can really catch attention of different parties, being the civil societies, being the society itself, men and women and even children, by the way, and also, again, the government. So do you really find it as a very big problem, a dangerous one to get concerned about?
Does it raise some red flags?
Yes.
Should it raise flags for people, the society, the government and civil society?
I think there should be an extreme amount of concern. I think mental health is probably one of the most dangerous challenges that we are facing as a society, as a community, both African and globally. and specifically in Rwanda, if you don't deal with drama, it's going to evidence itself some way, shape, or form. It's going to rear its ugly head, whether it's in the household, right, where men become abusive to themselves and to others, right, drugs, domestic violence, all of these things, they're all driven by some type of trauma. There is something within us, you, society, that is out of alignment. And until we address that issue, we're always capable of doing things that are counterculture, but that they seem to come out of nowhere, but they've just been bubbling up. So I think it's important for Invictus security interests to do its part by starting the foundation, right, to seed the conversation. It's important for civil societies to come together to help us address these issues. And from a government perspective, I mean, it is as essential as laying down roads, putting in infrastructure for telecom. CCTV, it is as critical as all of those activities, because at the end of the day, if you don't have strong men in your society, you don't have a strong society.
Yeah. But one of the problems the men face in this context of mental health is the fear of being victimized in the society. And even after one has visited the mental health facility, you know, the information is shared within the society that someone is having some problems mentally. Maybe. Is that really a problem that should concern men? Men should really get it as a very big problem, or there's something there's a way forward that men can go, or something that can be done that they can really address this the situation they are going through, the problems they are going through, you know. So what do you say about it?
I think when you see mental health as a broader problem, maybe less severe than mental illness, right? You know, I was having a conversation with a group that's based out of Rwanda, and we were talking about partnerships. And I said, how many people do you know, and they're already in schools, they're already doing it. I said, how many people do you know that don't have a mental health issue? And he says, well, I don't know any that don't have mental health problems. But there's a distinction between mental health problem and mental health illness, right? And I think when you categorize everything in the extreme of an illness, it then causes everybody else to kind of run away from it. So, I mean, I think you have issues like schizophrenia, bipolar disorders, et cetera, but then you have things like anxiety, depression, right? You have those lesser, what I would consider lesser, as dangerous and as significant issues, but lesser. So when everybody's characterized as the most extreme mental illness category, I think it's a deterrent for people to actually go and seek and get help. But the more awareness that you build, that look, these things that you're experiencing on a daily basis, there's support to help you work yourselves through that, given the current environment that we're in. I think it becomes much more palatable.
All right. Sabiti was saying that level of unemployment has, the rate has increased to even to 17 point something. And maybe that's one of the things that is causing the mental health in Maine around. It's a good factor to consider though, but there's something I wanted to ask. It is per Rwanda Biomedical Center, the survey, 39 years to 50 years, I mean men aged 39 to 50 years, they are the ones most affected per RBC. Why do you think, okay, when you look around, it's like they are married men, 39 to 50, mostly unmarried men. Do you think this problem originates from the family? I mean, the mental health is affecting families more than maybe the youth, or there's something you think that causes people in this range of age to have mental health problems?
So I was at the memorial yesterday, and I saw a statistic. 70% of children that were in Rwanda during the genocide saw somebody die. 80% saw somebody die or knew somebody who died. 90% thought they were going to die. So when we talk about that 39-year-old age range, During the '94 deal, they were what, close to 30 years ago, 9 years old. Okay, so there's trauma that needs to be addressed, just that basic trauma. But then again, you get back into pulling in these Western principles, right? And they're at that age where they're supposed to be working, quote unquote working, generating income from a job, not providing for the family, generating income from a job. So I think the short answer to your question is that, number one, there's a lot of trauma that hasn't been dealt with. That trauma has not been dealt with. I can tell you, you can't figure it out yourself. Certainly some of the reconciliation that's taken place, I'm sure, has helped deal with it, but has there been any specific efforts for that?
But now, what do you think will happen if we don't address these problems? If we don't really tackle the problem?
Some people might say,
yeah.
So what? Why shouldn't I stay the way I am? I mean, with my trauma or with my stress or with my depression. Some people say, I'd rather stay like this. So what will happen if they don't?
Increase drug usage.
Yeah, if they don't address this issue.
Increase drug usage, more domestic violence, broken families, more abuse in the house, in the homes, more violence on the streets. I mean, it's an issue that, if not addressed, will continue to evidence itself in negative statistics for the country.
The statistics are there, actually. Last time when I was on air, I told you that the numbers of divorces have increased annually to 8,000 from about 170, from about 67 divorces in 2016. Today they are at 8,000 per year. And believe me or not, many people would agree with me on family being a key aspect of nation building. But with a distorted family and with all these mental health problems that are not being addressed, we shall have a hard time actually addressing some of the human capital issues that we're looking at. For example, to have a knowledge-based economy and income, a population which is able to afford some things. One of the guys here has just told me that it's not a big deal for him to spend 500,000 or to see people spending 500,000 over beer. But this reminds me of the story of Urwagwa. Chris, when you go to the bar, you order for Urwagwa. Why?
So when I first came to Rwanda, I was curious about the traditional drinks. What are the traditional drinks? And one of the guys that works with me, good friend, he basically said, you know, well, the traditional drink is Urwagwa. And I said, what? It's Urwagwa, banana wine. I said, oh, okay. Have you had it? No. He says no. Right. It's a traditional drink. And I said, where can you get it? And then he points me down to a bar down the street from where I live, Gate 10. And it's literally the only place on that street in that neighborhood that sells Urwagwa, right? The traditional drink. So I take it, I drink it, and it tastes pretty good. Right? So I'm like, hey, you should try this. And he's like, oh no, I don't drink Urwagwa. What do you mean you don't drink Urwagwa? Traditional drink. It's rich in antioxidants. It's very healthy for you, right? You get all these different nutrients that come from it. And he's like, huh. So then he tries it. He's like, oh, this is good, right? So the next thing you know, we're all sitting around drinking Urwagwa. Now every Rwandan I come across, 90% of the Rwandans I come across, they don't drink Urwagwa. But when they drink it, they're like, oh, this is pretty good. Oh, no hangovers. Oh, it's healthy, rich in antioxidants and a lot of different vitamins and minerals that you get from it. You know, but they'll go to a bar and they'll say, I'll get some Jack Daniels. Jack Daniels is poison. Jack Daniels has no health benefits in it whatsoever. It actually decreases your lifespan every time you drink one. Right? But you'll go and buy a glass of Jack Daniels, a shot, this much, of poison.
Every time.
Yes, and pay 5 times more than you pay for a whole bottle of Urwagwa. If that's not a mental health issue, I drink poison over my traditional drink. which actually tastes good and is healthy for me. And it helps build my economy because people make this at home. They put it in a jar. Now I'm feeding somebody else's family versus I'm going to give $10,000 to $12,000, 1,000 francs to a bar in order to get a poison.
How do you connect it to the mental health issue? Like,
It definitely comes to mental health, guys. Because if you're going to live a standard that is even
it's beyond your capacity.
No. How do you not connect it into the mental health issue, right? You're choosing between a healthy alcoholic beverage that supports and builds your community versus poison that just takes money out of your community 5 times the cost of the healthy thing. Are you mentally healthy and sound if you choose poison at 5 times the cost?
You're not. You're not.
You're not. Right.
All right. And even also, I think economically, like you're spending a lot of money on something that maybe that is going even to kill you, by the way. It's going to kill you.
That's why we have NCDs increasing.
Yeah, you know. And that's why in the end you're going to be bankrupt, you know. And one of the things that make men run crazy
is when they are bankrupt.
That's when they are bankrupt. That's when they have nothing in their pockets. So the more you take the so-called poisonous drinks, and they're expensive.
So socially you will be put on pressure to actually maintain that standard.
Yeah, sure. That is it.
And when anything, I'm a psychologist myself, that's why I'm chipping in here. So mentally, you are on pressure, you are pressurized. You don't live your own life as a person, either because your girlfriend wants a Jack Daniels to feel like the rest of the girls around. Yeah. So that means you're either going to cheat, to embezzle government funds. You've seen how much money is lost in projects because some men are forced by their girlfriends to keep those standards. So you saw in the Auditor General's report how much money was lost because either somebody is putting them on pressure to actually live a lifestyle that is not their own. So it definitely affect the economy. It does not only affect the person.
And so from a psychologist standpoint, I'm glad he said that because he is a psychologist, right?
That's what he said.
Society, right? When you live in a broken society, everybody's doing things that are broken. They're all doing things that are counterculture and counterproductive to themselves, right? So now you just get caught in this wave. So from an Invictus Foundation standpoint, it's really about expanding this issue so that now society says, you know what, let's stop putting people in the pressure cooker and forcing them to continue to do things that doesn't make sense.
Like taking the Jack Daniels.
Yeah, why drink Jack Daniels? When you go to the bar now, because we had this conversation, are you at least going to think about it when you say, give me that Jack?
No.
You're not going to think about it, you're just going to order the Jack, right? Huh? You telling me you're not?
I can never take the Jack Daniels from the time we talked about.
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah, sure. You know.
And let's do the mathematics here, guys. Let's do the math here. If I bought Urwagwa every day, that means I'm creating jobs for people in Kayonza, in Ramagana, in Bujesera, in Kibungo, where bananas are, yes. And do you know how many families are going to either have health insurance?
Very many.
Do you know how many transporters who are going to get
transport fees?
no, even jobs to do?
Yeah, definitely.
Because the buses that bring those, the lorries that bring those, the Urwagwa bananas into the factories will also get. Do you know how many factories will open if 6 million out of the 13 million, up to the 13.2 million people? If 6 million adults, if the 6 million, we have 3 million of them drinking Urwaga, do you know how much money that would put for Rwanda revenue in terms of even developing industry? Because in Rwanda we are struggling with the economy because the industry is still down. Now, the reason why I actually was interested in talking to Chris is for him to show people that actually understanding our mental status. But you cannot understand your mental status without knowing who you are.
That's one of the solutions they're suggesting.
I think we are coming to the end of the show in a way. It is very important for me to tell Rwandans that if you know who you are and what you exactly need, you can actually reduce some of the mental problems that we have today. Mental problems doesn't mean mental illness, because we are not schizophrenic. But even social pressure that pulls us to actually embezzle government money which should have been used to build schools and hospitals and roads, and some son of a person is using it to upkeep a slave queen. This is laughable, but it's the reality.
Yeah, it's tragic, actually. Yeah.
It's tragic. Yeah. One person's mental health problem can actually become a national mental issue.
Mm-hmm.
Chris.
I think you said it all. This is a mic drop moment right now. Drop the mic, walk off the stage, and say,
your last word.
Actually,
God, your last word.
My last word. Okay, maybe I should first listen hear from Chris when he's talking about the suggestion. Maybe you do please suggest something, 1, 2, or 3 that you think, either on the side of men, on the side of organizations like Invictus, on the side of the government, that should be done. Maybe 3. 1 for the men, 1 for the government, and 1 for the civil societies. You know.
Even families and
maybe and even
individuals like God who don't think that taking good work is very important.
You guys ask tough questions. So from a company standpoint, Invictus, not the foundation, Invictus, we focus everything on buying local. Not buying local, buying local. Is it grown here? Right? Is it an indigenous staple? Right? Because we believe that even our cook, we give him the directions. You don't go to the supermarket, you go to the local market. And that's where you spend the money. We don't get an EBM, that's fine. Right? If we have to pay the extra tax on it, that's fine. But you go to the local market because you need to stimulate that local economy. You need to keep people who are growing the sustenance, the food that we eat. We need to keep them active, because if you don't, you start going to the supermarkets, you're now aggregating. You get some aggregator who goes out and buys it from penny on the dollar, takes all the profit, gives you old food, right? It doesn't work. So buy local is one from the corporate perspective. From an individual perspective, it's really, if you look at, just living a healthy lifestyle, you'll make the right decisions. You'll look at Jack Daniels versus Agua, health benefits versus poison. And you'll make those right decisions, and that'll ultimately help benefit the economy, the communities that you come from. It'll make them stronger, more wealthy as well. And then from a government perspective, I try to stay out of politics. But what I would say is that you have to look at making policy decisions that aren't necessarily about meeting Western metrics, right? The amount of crops, cash crops that you export shouldn't necessarily be a statistic that you tout and say, I want to increase this. Because the Belgian people came here because they needed to get food for their people. So they came in, cash crops, grow these things that we eat. Not the things that you eat, grow these things that we eat. And then, it brings in a little bit of money. So if you still adopt those same policies, what you're doing is you're taking away from the people here. You're affecting their health, because now you have them eating foods that aren't indigenous to their health system. You're taking away economic opportunities, and you're focusing more on large-scale agricultural developers than smaller subsistence farmers. So it's really looking at policies that really get everything focused back at the local level.
Well, that's good. Just about my last word. Am I going to say people should step in and increasing steps of taking Gurguago other than Jack Daniels? I don't know. But all is that men should be treated the same way like women are treated when it comes to mental health, when it comes to mental problems. If someone shows mental problems, should be treated the same way like women do, you know. And men also should also like break the bias, you know, break the bias. Don't keep silent. When you keep silent, you die more. Like it takes you closer to your hole. It takes you closer to your grave, you know. So it is better to speak out. It's better to go for treatment. It's better to go for, you know, for therapists, you know, so to help you and break the bias. Because if you don't, obviously, you're heading to your grave soon. Yeah, that's my last word. Sabiti, anything before we end?
Chris has inspired me to say some last words. I had already said my last words, but let me say something. In my last words.
Okay.
One, women should know that it's possible to, it's okay to have a mental health problem.
It's okay.
These are lessons I'm getting out of my encounter with Chris and the foundation. It's okay to be mentally sick, and nobody can actually treat a mental health problem totally, because it keeps popping up, or the lapses keep, you know, you keep lapsing in and out. It's okay to be mentally sick. That's like, for example, to have stress or some mental disorders, you know, that can be cancelled and treated. And as a politician, I think if we address mental health problems in the Rwandan society, we shall have a very good foundation of the family and the nation. Otherwise, it's going to impact on everything that we do and how we think. And as a last word, for men out there who still drink Jack Daniels and the big shot beers, drink Urwagwa and make Rwanda proud, you know. Consume Rwanda, promote Rwanda, use Rwanda. That way we can build a society that is actually Rwandan, other than building a Western society and thinking that we are there, but when we are not there. Yeah.
There's something I liked about Chris's statement. Last word, buying local. You know, the same thing that you ended your statement with. Buying local. So I like that, Chris. So, Chris, we thank you for having us today at your offices. And
We are having him at his office.
really? Are we are having him at his office, or he's having us?
You're having me on the show at my office.
So, Chris, thank you for all that.
And also would like to thank Chris for being able to give an example for other people in the US and in Europe. I think it's always the right decision for you to come back to your roots.
Yeah, sure. So reminding you that Chris Darkins is the chairman of Invictus Foundation. So we've come to the end of the show. We really thank you for having this time for us. And we are really blessed today, Sabiti. Yeah. I think this is it, and we shall come back here.
Okay.
Right.
Say ciao ciao.
Is it ciao ciao?
Yeah.
Ciao ciao. Bye.